Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles, and today is the day. At least if you're playing on the EU server, the patch is out. And amongst a whole host of other things, we've got the British light cruisers at last. Now, I've only had 2 days to get to grips with these things, so I've had to prioritise exactly what I was going to play and when. And I've had a good look at the Belfast. The video of that went up 2 days ago. That's the Tier 7 Premium. And since this is basically what you're going to be aiming towards getting at the end of the tech tree, today I'm going to be taking a look at the British Tier 10 light cruiser, HMS Minotaur. So with no equipment modules and no commander in place to screw up the stats, we're going to take a look at the bare bones stock, fresh out of the dockyard, HMS Minotaur. Starting with survivability, health, 44,500. That's more than the Zhao, but it's less than the Des Moines, and it's less than the Hindenburg. Now, when you take that into consideration with the armour on this ship as well, that's going to be a bit of a problem, because it's a light cruiser, it's not very well armoured at all. Anything between 6 and 127mm of armour, and the 127mm of armour is not around the Citadel. The Citadel is 101mm. The gun turret fronts have 127mm of armour, it's only 101 around the Citadel. It is also quite a big Citadel. You can see it stretching all the way from the magazines at the aft, through the engine spaces, up to the magazines up front. It is pretty low in the water, however, except where the engine room Citadel is. But that's not the real issue with the armour. It's the fore and end plating. It's only 16mm. What else do we know that has 16mm of fore and aft plating? Ladies and gentlemen, the Japanese Tier 6 destroyer, the Mitsuki, or at least it was Tier 6 the day I recorded this video. I think it's Tier 5 now. That also has 16mm of armour everywhere. It's not such an issue in the Minakaze because, well, that's going to get penetrated by armour-piercing and high explosive, but destroyers don't have citadels. Cruisers do. The traditional tactic, other than running away when you're in a cruiser dealing with a battleship, is to turn the bows straight towards him and just hope for the best. That's not going to do you any good in the Minotaur, not with 16mm of fore and aft plating. Battleship caliber shells are going to go right through that. The fuse isn't even going to arm. And if you're facing straight ahead or running straight away from a battleship, it's probably going to penetrate your Citadel armour. So that's a bit of an issue, especially since you only have 44,000 health. So that's the bad news. But it's pretty much the only real bad news when you're looking at the Minotaur. Let's take a look at the guns. This is where the good news starts. The Minotaur, in common with all of the other British cruisers, is a light cruiser, so it does not get 203mm guns. Instead, it has guns of the same caliber, 152mm, as the American Tier 6, the Cleveland. But these are not the same as the guns on the Cleveland. They do share some similarities, but the rate of fire on these things is astronomical. The Minotaur was designed, although not built, as an air defence cruiser. These guns were designed to fill the sky with as much flak as possible and shoot down low-flying jets. These turrets fire a shot, all 10 of them, every 3.2 seconds. Do not adjust your sets, that is not a misprint, you heard me right. 3.2 seconds. The rate of fire is ridiculous. This thing has higher damage per minute than even the Des Moines. Just watch this and you'll see what I'm talking about. Here we've got a Baltimore, the American Tier 9 cruiser, closing in. There's a North Carolina Tier 8 battleship not too far behind him. And they're about to be joined by a Bismarck Tier 8 battleship coming around the far side of the island over there. There's the Bismarck. We've got a very badly damaged Benson spotting these guys and praying that we can do some damage to them before he's forced to fall back. So, even at this range, I'm able to shoot the Baltimore without being detected. But if he gets any closer, he's going to spot me, so I pop my smoke screen. I've slowed to a stop. The smoke generator is only active for 7 seconds. Now that doesn't mean the smoke screen only lasts 7 seconds, it actually lasts quite a while. But it only generates smoke for 7 seconds. Which means that it's only really going to generate 2 puffs of smoke and then it stops. So you need to be going slow when you fire the smoke screen up, otherwise you'll just sail straight out of the smoke screen. Smoke screen's not very big. But now that the smoke screen has been generated, well, just look at the rate of fire of these guns as I'm blazing away at the Baltimore. I'll pop some torpedoes in his direction as well. They have a 10km range and they're pretty fast. You never know your luck, but I'm basically working this guy over with the guns. Look at that rate of fire. It is absolutely insane. 3.2 second reload, 10 guns. It's 187 shots per minute. The Des Moines can't even do that, although it does have larger caliber guns, but it doesn't have the DPM of the Minotaur. And that Baltimore, yep, he's done. It's just a matter of time. And then I can start shooting at the Bismarck. But my smoke screen's about to dissipate, so I need to start moving after sinking the Baltimore. But we're going to show you what happens next when we come to discuss the manoeuvrability. For now, let's get back to the guns. Now, you probably already realise it because I did cover it on Tuesday when I looked at the Belfast, but none of the British cruisers, aside from the Belfast, the Tier 7 Premium, have high explosive ammunition. It's just armour piercing. So, how are you supposed to handle a battleship if you only have 152mm armour piercing shells? British armour piercing shells in World of Warships have superior normalisation values. Now, I don't know the exact figures, and without going into too much technical detail, what this basically means is that when you're firing British armour piercing ammunition against angled armour, it stands a better chance of actually digging into and penetrating that angled armour than the equivalent armour piercing ammunition fired by other nations. What this means in practice is, well, time for another example. So, a couple of things that I have noticed about the guns on the Minotaur. They are good guns, but the shell velocity is slow. Now, this does mean that they have quite a high ballistic arc, and when you're engaging a target at long range, like a battleship, this Iowa for example, the shots tend to come in from directly above, plunging fire. So you're going to see small damage numbers and big damage numbers, and you're mostly going to see the big damage numbers when the ship is giving you the side to shoot at. And your shells are coming down, they're not hitting the superstructure, they're penetrating the deck armour, and they're doing a good amount of damage. Watch this Iowa, he's just turned around, he's had far too much high explosive spam from the destroyers over there, and I've just about found the range, and here come the shots. There, 4,200. Now, they missed the superstructure, and they went in through the deck armour. Now, the deck armour is thick enough to arm the fuses, so the shells explode when they go through the deck, but they don't penetrate the citadel armour under the deck. So you're never going to get a citadel with these things. Well, never's a very long time. You're certainly never going to get a citadel firing at a battleship at this kind of range. Not with plunging fire. They're only 152mm guns. But the damage that you do does add up. Most of the damage that you're going to do to a battleship is going to be over penetrations on the superstructure, but some of those shots are going to miss the superstructure, they're going to hit the deck armour, they're going to go through, and they're going to do a reasonable amount of damage. And it all adds up over time. Anyway, cut a long story short, the Iowa went down. But I wasn't the only one shooting at the Iowa. I mean, he's burning from stem to stern. He was being lit up by 2 different destroyers, as well as a friendly battleship. So, how about this North Carolina? I'm the only one shooting at this guy. Well, at least for now. But what you're going to notice with the North Carolina is that when he's manoeuvring hard, he's going to be able to avoid a surprising amount of my shots. And that's not just because I'm a terrible shot. I am a terrible shot. But the shells just take so long to get to the target that even something as big and ungainly and relatively unmanoeuvrable as a battleship is able to avoid a lot of the fire from these guns because they just take so long to get there. If I was closer than around about 10 kilometers, I'd be scoring much more consistent hits. But I don't want to get closer than 10 kilometers to something with 16-inch guns because if he hits me, bad things are going to happen. So I'm playing it safe and I'm staying at a reasonable range because, well, I'm still doing 20,000 damage to this North Carolina, so I don't really need to get any closer and put myself at any kind of risk. And, well, judging by the reaction in chat, it certainly seems to have had the desired effect. The Minotaur's got some pretty nice torpedoes as well. In fact, it's got a very, very heavy torpedo load. 16 torpedoes. That's more than most of the destroyers. 2 launchers per side, each with 4 tubes. The torpedoes have a 10-kilometer range and a speed of 62 knots. They take just over a minute and a half to reload the launchers. Next up, anti-aircraft guns. The anti-aircraft guns on the Minotaur are a kind of good news, bad news situation. It has a very, very solid anti-aircraft rating of 94, but we're going to take a look at the consumables available now because this ties in. What it doesn't have is the defensive fire cooldown. You get hydroacoustic search, premium or regular. You get the choose between smoke or radar. You can't have both. Go for smoke. Radar's nice, smoke is better. And of course, because you're a tier 10 cruiser, you also get the damage repair ability, the same as battleships. But no defensive fire consumable. None of the British cruisers get it. A lot of them have pretty potent anti-aircraft firepower. The Minotaur is no exception. Its anti-aircraft firepower is actually very, very good. but it's not an air defence cruiser because it doesn't have the burst fire capability that you get from that defensive fire cooldown. It doesn't have the ability to scatter a torpedo or a dive bomber drop. But what it does have is lots of brute force anti-aircraft firepower. It has 20 of these 20mm Oerlikons. Now they only have a 2 km range. Those are self-defense weapons. Then it has 16 of these 76.2mm anti-aircraft emplacements, and they have 315 damage per second and a 5 km range. Last but not least, all 10 of those 152mm main battery guns, they're anti-aircraft guns as well. 118 damage per second and a 6 km range. This is why these main battery guns turn as quickly as they do. They were designed to be able to track and shoot at low-flying jet aircraft. We'll come back to the anti-aircraft armament in a moment, but for now we're going to take a look at the speed and manoeuvrability. Top speed of 33.5 knots, which is a perfectly respectable speed for a cruiser. Turning circle, not bad, 660 meters. 10.4 second stock rudder shift time, however. We're probably going to need to address that, particularly on a ship that is as fragile as this thing is. Throwing the ship around when you're being fired at by battleships is what's going to keep you alive. But there's one feature about the manoeuvrability of this ship that isn't visible just by looking at the raw manoeuvrability stats. And for that, we're going to give you another couple of examples. We've gone back to when I was shooting up the Baltimore earlier. Now, he's about to die, but my smoke screen is about to dissipate, and there's a North Carolina within shooting range, and there's a Bismarck who's getting uncomfortably close. So now I've fired up the engines, and I'm accelerating to full speed. And this is how long it takes the Minotaur from a standing start to get up to full speed of 33.5 knots. And we are pretty much there. The acceleration on this ship is absolutely crazy, and that's not all. There are plenty of fast cruisers in World of Warships. The Minotaur certainly isn't the fastest. But theoretical top speed and actual top speed are two entirely different things. There are plenty of cruisers out there that seem pretty fast in a straight line, but as soon as you start trying to turn, your speed plummets down to 20 knots or worse, and you become a sitting duck. You do not get that in the Minotaur. Look at this. That's a hard rudder turn at full speed, and my speed does not drop below 32.8 knots. This ship has so much acceleration, it even accelerates while under a full power turn. You can be sitting in a smoke screen in this thing, blazing away, stationary. You realise your smoke screen is about to dissipate, or perhaps an enemy ship's getting a little too close. You open up the throttle, pull a hard turn, and you will accelerate up to 32 knots while turning. There are destroyers that can't do that. So everybody was asking, how are these British cruisers going to survive with no armour and 152mm guns? And well, there's your answer. Combination of smokescreen and absolutely ridiculous agility. The trick, of course, is knowing when to use the agility and when to use the smokescreen. If you get it wrong, very, very bad things happen. This is one of the first games that I had in the Minotaur, and I was still getting the grips with the whole fact that the smoke generator only pulses for 7 seconds. I was of course aware that you need to be going at 12.5 knots or less at the very most in order to stay inside your smoke screen. So I started slowing down, but I have been spotted. Waiting for the speed to drop down below that magic 12.5 knots number, because I want to get the smoke up and start shooting up these, oh crap, incoming fire. Yeah, there goes just over a third of my health, and I am still going too fast. You see the smoke screen? It's behind me. Oh crap. And here comes even more incoming fire. And that is what happens if you screw things up in the Minotaur. Things go very, very bad very, very quickly. Yeah, getting hit in this thing really, really hurts. So what can you do about that? Well, the best way to not get shot at is to not be seen in the first place, and obviously the smoke screen is going to help with that. But that's not all that the Minotaur has going for it. The Soviet Tier 10 cruiser, the Moskva, can be spotted on the surface from a range of 18 kilometers. It's practically a battleship. The German Tier 10, the Hindenburg, 16 kilometers. Things are looking a bit better with the American Tier 10, the Des Moines, with 13.9 kilometers, and even more so with the Japanese Tier 10, the Zhang. 12.6 kilometer surface detection range, that is pretty impressive for a heavy cruiser. But none of these guys can hold a candle to the Minotaur, which can only be spotted on the surface from a range of 11.2 kilometers. And of course there are things that you can do about that as well. And this is where we're going to take a look at the modules that are available for the Minotaur. Number one choice, complete no-brainer, you're going to want to fit the concealment system modification. This will reduce your surface detection range down to 10.1 kilometers. That's 0.1 kilometers more than the Soviet Tier 10 destroyer. This is such a no-brainer, they should just charge you an extra 2 million credits for the ship and have this thing come as standard. Next, another no-brainer. While it is always tempting to fit the damage control system modification, you want the steering gear modification. This will get your rudder shift time down to 8.3 seconds. And for a ship that relies for its survival on its low profile and agility, this is another complete no-brainer. None of the next three choices are particular no-brainers, but you can always take the last stand commander skill and lessen the need for the propulsion or steering gear modification, so go ahead and take the damage control mod 1 instead. For your next choice, you're going to have to make a hard decision here because, well, your basic two choices are the AA guns modification or the gunfire control system modification. If you go for the gunfire control system modification, which is going to be most people's first choice, you will extend the range of your main battery guns to 18.3 kilometers, and with the concealment system fitted, you're only going to be seen from a range of 10.1 kilometers, so this is very, very tempting. The problem is that you're just not going to hit anything at 18.3 kilometers because of the slow velocity of these 152mm shells. Your alternative, however, is to beef up the anti-aircraft defences by choosing the AA modification. That's going to add 25% to the damage per second of all your anti-aircraft guns. So we'll go ahead and do that and see what it does to the damage per minute of our anti-aircraft guns. We now have an AA rating of 100. Our 20 mils have 76 damage per minute now. Our 76.2 mils have almost 400 damage per minute, and our 152 mils have 148. So let's just hold that thought for a minute and go and look at the next choice. Now, aiming system modifications is always a popular choice, but the guns are very accurate in the first place, and it's not the accuracy of the guns, it's the long travel time of the shells that's the issue. And half of the benefits given by this modification apply to the secondaries, and this ship doesn't have any. On the other hand, 20% further firing range on our anti-aircraft guns may be more useful, so we'll go ahead and fit that and see what that does to our anti-aircraft guns. Our 20mm guns now have a 2.4 kilometer range, okay? Nothing great about that. Our 76.2mm guns, which have nearly 400 damage per minute, now have a 6 kilometer range, and our 152mm guns now have a 7.2 kilometer range. Not even the Des Moines can shoot down aircraft from that far away. And for a final choice, well, it's pretty much always going to be main armaments modification. But we're not done tinkering yet. We haven't had a look at crew skills. Here's a captain I prepared earlier. I've only played a few games in the Minotaur, so he's not exceptionally well skilled, but we'll go through the skills anyway. For your tier 1 skill, you're going to pick basics of survivability. Basic firing training is not completely useless. It's mostly useless because the ship does not have any secondary batteries, and the main batteries are 152mm, not 139 or below, but you can still get an extra 10% to the damage per section of your anti-aircraft guns, so if you have the spare point, then by all means put it into basic firing training. Expert loader is a complete waste of time. This ship does not have high explosive ammunition for its guns, so basics of survivability should always be your first tier 1 skill. Next, tier 2 skills. Expert marksman, waste of time. Turrets only take 4.7 seconds to rotate anyway, and an extra 0.7 degrees per second is just not worth the point. Next, torpedo armament expertise is not a bad idea, but there are better places for you to put your first tier 2 skill point. Fire prevention is not it. It's always a complete waste of time. Incoming fire alert is not a bad idea. Knowing when battleships are shooting at you is always a good thing in this ship. And again, if you have the spare point, or the spare 2 points, you could consider investing it here. But for my money, you want to put your first tier 2 skill into last stand, so you can keep moving and manoeuvring even after the ship's been crippled. At tier 3, there are some good skills at tier 3, and you're going to want to pick some of them up if you have the spare points, but again, I think there's a bit of a no-brainer. It's not torpedo acceleration, it's not high alert. Vigilance is nice to have, but for your first tier 3 skill you definitely want Superintendent for an extra charge on all of your consumables, your hydroacoustic search, your smokescreen, or your radar if you haven't picked smokescreen for some strange reason, and your damage repair ability. At tier 4 you've got 2 useful skills, and Demolition Expert is not one of them. Advanced firing training. With this, your 152mm guns are going to be shooting aircraft down at I think around about 8.2 kilometers, and your 76mm 400 damage per minute guns are going to be shooting aircraft down at a range of something like 7.2 kilometers. Ain't no carrier going to be expecting that. Alternatively, you could go for manual fire control for your anti-aircraft guns, but this will only apply to your 152mm guns, not the 76.2s and not the 20mm, so I definitely think advanced firing training is the best choice for your first tier 4 skill. If you're lucky enough to have a 15-point captain, concealment expert, there's no other choice. A further 12% reduction to the surface detection range of what is already the sneakiest tier 10 cruiser in the game will mean that your surface detection range in this thing is going to be around about 9 kilometers in a tier 10 cruiser. Let's not forget, the tier 10 Soviet destroyer has a surface detection range of 10 kilometers. Yeah, it's that good. And that pretty much is the Minotaur. I really wish I'd had more time to play this thing, because I only felt like I was starting to get to grips with it after, well, 4 or 5 games. It took about that long to get the hang of the slow velocity, the armor-piercing shells, the fact that the smoke generator only pulses for 7 seconds, so you really have to be on the ball with your speed changes when you're going to decide to use that smoke. This is not an easy ship to play. I do think that this is skilled captains only. And the reason I say that is because, it's the kind of ship that can do exceptionally well, providing you have other teammates still alive, spotting targets for you and taking hits for you. This ship does not react well at all to getting shot at. So you kind of have to push the tempo at the start of every match you play in this ship and be aggressive while you've still got surviving teammates around you to get the damage done before the enemy are forced to turn their guns on you because they've got nobody else to shoot at. And that means you have to be good, because if you're going to be aggressive in this ship and get a lot of damage done in this ship, you've got to close the range to 10 kilometers or less, and that means skillful use of concealment, using the terrain and the islands, using your smokescreen effectively, and putting yourself into positions where you can do the maximum amount of damage and still withdraw without getting hammered by battleships and heavy cruisers. It's going to be a tough ship to play well. I mean, anybody can just derp around at the back of the map, get the aiming system modification, get yourself an 18.6 kilometer firing range with your 10.1 kilometer surface detection range, or even less if you've got the 5-point captain skill there. And you'll do some damage, but you won't do big numbers by just throwing shells at people 18.6 kilometers away. You have to get closer than that to make this thing really work, and that's dangerous. So skilled captains only need apply. So this is what you have waiting for you at the end of the long grind in the British light cruiser line, available in World of Warships today. I wonder how many people have been saving their free experience for this. That's it for today, folks. Hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.